Well, hello and welcome to SOS Sisters Overcoming Stress. I am your co-host, Denora Nieves, and I am here with your other co-host, the lovely Tia Robinson. Hey, Tia.
Hey, Tenora. Hey, everyone.
So, this month I released an article about caregiver burnout, and I
Yes,
thought
I
it
read
was
it.
the perfect thing for us to talk about because I've certainly felt some of that recently. So caregiver burnout is basically defined as physical, mental, emotional exhaustion that's associated with somebody constantly taking care of other people, right? Now, this comes up obviously for people who have an ill loved one. That's sort of the more common use of the term, but you and I know this comes up in all kinds of other places for all kinds of other people, right?
Yes.
We have clients who just like feel guilty taking time out for themselves because they're always busy about taking care of their children, and worried and don't want to do anything other than that.
Yeah.
We know people who are constantly trying to take care of their family because they don't feel like they can do it without them. So
Mhm.
talk to me about how this comes up for you or for your clients, and let's talk some of this through.
A lot of the times when I work with clients and I talk about stress management and we try to identify specific areas of stress, they automatically go to work, right? So they want to talk about all the stuff that's going on at work.
Yep.
Or, they talk about home and they talk about kids, but a lot of the times we have to unpack a lot of that stuff because sometimes there's a disconnect in terms of how being a caretaker can be a stressful role, right? It's almost thought as it being selfish in a sense. And so people don't want to bring up that area of their life into the conversation because they're like, well, I don't want to complain about it. This is something that I'm supposed to do. I'm a
Right.
daughter.
The
I have
obligation.
parents that need me.
The
I have
duty.
children.
Yep.
And yes, the duty and the responsibility. So
Yeah.
a lot of times, we'll go into really deep conversation as it relates to work and professional stress and burnout. And we just kind of glide over everything else. And I
Right. Those
usually have
personal
to go
relationships.
back, and scale back and talk about, some of the responsibilities and the roles that we take on outside of work that could lead to stress and burnout. So it's always an interesting topic, but it's definitely one that we have to visit because it is a stressful role to be a caretaker, and especially when you are a caretaker of an adult parent, right?
Yep.
It's kind of when you think about it, our parents have always been there to take care of us, and there's this really very specific point in time where the tables turn and there's a shift, right? They start getting older, you start getting older, but they move from being very independent to needing a little bit more assistance from their children. And I mean, it's natural. But it is something that's unfamiliar to both parties in a sense. You have the parents on one end saying, I'm still the parent and, you can't tell me what to do. And it reminds you of your 16-year-old self, right? And you as an adult is like, well, mommy, daddy, should you be doing that? Are you taking your pills? Are you sleeping? Are you drinking enough water? Should you be eating that food? Maybe not so much. But it's a very delicate and sensitive transition that you go through, and just that transition in itself can be very stressful because just think about it. Your parents are sitting down eating a plate of something that they're not supposed to be eating, right? And you're concerned about their health and their well-being, and this may not be the case with everyone's parents, but this may be the case with some folks, and it's something that you have to address, right? So you addressing that is stressful. Because the dynamic in terms of your relationship changes and it shifts. And then on top of that, the responsibility that's something that you now have to continue to keep up with for how many ever years, when it comes to making sure that the well-being of our loved ones is is still intact and still in the best space that it can possibly be in.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And there's so everything you said, absolutely. There's that sense of obligation and responsibility. There's that commitment that you're making, and you're looking at how this is going to affect you long term. So there's a pressure when it comes to that. And then you have that shift in the power dynamic, right? From, being the child, right, to being the almost surrogate parent at this point, right?
Child parent.
Yeah. And it happens in all relationships, right? It's not just the parent-child relationship. I mean, I think the places where it's the most difficult to deal with often, for me even, and also for my clients, is where there are vulnerable people concerned. When we're talking about the elderly, when we're talking about the ill, when we're talking about children, because there's almost a shame that people feel if they're putting their needs above these other people, because they know these people are so fragile. They know these people are so vulnerable, and these people are depending on us to be able to help them. And so how dare we almost have our own needs? And so there's all this guilt and there's all this shame that comes up for people in trying to balance how to take care of other people and also how to take care of themselves. And that balance is hard to strike. When do you know that it's enough? When do you know that you're doing too much? Or how do you know that this is the moment where you should walk away and let them figure out what to do next, versus this is the moment where you really need to insert yourself and try to be a resource? I mean, that's a very delicate balance to strike.
It is. And I always say that if you are not investing in your self-care, then that literally is like sign number one.
That's it. Right? That is it.
Because you can't water a plant when you don't have anything to water it with, right?
Right.
So
you ain't got no water because they cut your water off because you wasn't paying attention.
You ain't walking go get
water
no water.
bill.
Exactly. Your water is dry. You need to go get some.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
But yeah, so if you are sacrificing your own self-care and your own self-care practice, then that's sign number one, right? That there needs to be some adjustments in the way that you operate, in the way that you think, because being a caretaker or caregiver does not mean that you sacrifice all of yourself for that responsibility or duty. Yep. And it's a very noble thing, but we need to be very careful when we think about when we do things, why it is that we're doing it, right? Because sometimes caretaking can feed the ego, and it can be very ego-based, right? So, no, well, I didn't do this or whatever. I can't do those things anymore because I'm taking care of my mom, right? Right. Okay, but it can be yourself.
Yeah.
You're addressing
and people use it as an excuse, as a distraction, right? How often do we take care of other people because it keeps us occupied from having to think about the changes we need to make in our own lives?
Yes.
Right? And it's so much more convenient to plan and plot and strategize and even execute changes in other people's life. But making those changes in your life, that's going to be a little harder, right? And so people...
Because I could tell you what's wrong with you all day, every day.
Yeah.
But I can't tell myself what's wrong with me and address those things in a way that really move me towards action.
Right. So sometimes people do it out of a sheer altruistic intent. And then sometimes there's all this other stuff. And we really have to check in with ourselves and figure out what really is driving us. Are we doing this because we really just care so much about this person and we see a need and we want to be available to fill it? Are we doing it because it puts us in a position of power that makes us feel stronger, more in control, less helpless, if we can sort of find ways to manipulate or ensure that the situation moves in the way that we want it to? Is it because it's distracting us from having to focus on ourselves so that we don't really need to be working on us because we're so busy helping other people work on them, right? What are the real key things that are going on inside of us? I think that's a really important thing that we need to check in with. And that's a hard thing. For me, I have a whole check-in routine. Right? Like I meditate, I pray, obviously. I do a lot of journaling. And as I'm journaling all the thoughts that come to my mind, I look with horror at some of the stuff that I wrote, and I'm like, oh wow, that's how I feel. Oh wow. But it does give me a greater sense of awareness, so I can check in with myself and say, wait, I thought I was doing this for this reason. Turns out I'm doing it for that reason. I need to recalibrate, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are some other ways that you think people can check in with themselves? Because I think for some of our listeners, that's a really important tool or technique that we're just not taught. We're not taught how to check in with our feelings, our thoughts, and figure out, what are we really doing? Why are we really doing it? What do we really want to come out of it? What do we really need from the situation? When do we back up? When do we, lean in? What's the next step, right? So what are good check-in techniques, do you think?
I mean, I think you mentioned the ones that I would really encourage people to use, which is going to be, if you are a prayer, definitely pray. But meditation and journaling, right?
Mm-hmm.
So many things and thoughts and ideas come to me after meditation, or even
Mm-hmm.
during the process.
Mm-hmm.
It really allows me to peel back layers.
Mm-hmm.
And it may not necessarily happen right there in that session, but in the hours or the days to come, you may really be able to tap into a part of yourself that you may not have been able to, especially when you are under stress, right? When you are under stress, the last thing you want to do is think,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And
strategize.
and yet somehow you can't seem to do anything else, though, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. But taking those couple of minutes to just sit and be still, the amount of space it frees up in your mind and your consciousness, right?
Yep.
Allows you to be able to tap into that reserve later when you need it. So when it comes time to be able to say, I need to go take a nap.
Mm-hmm.
Like, your mind has this little signal that's telling you need to go take a nap, or, you need to go take a walk outside.
Right.
Go be in nature,
Right.
Go for a hike,
Right.
go for a walk, get some sunlight. A lot of that doesn't happen when we don't have a wellness practice in place.
Yeah.
And then journaling, because sometimes the mind operates from a standpoint of just flooding you with too much information, right?
Mm-hmm.
So being able to capture that, being able to write things down, being able
just
to
the release of it.
Put it on paper and address it later. You just mentioned going back and reading some stuff and being like, oh wow, that's how I was feeling. It allows you to really kind of have a better understanding of where you are on a day-to-day basis. So I always recommend that people journal, and I always say that I use the morning time to really kind of focus on opening myself up and opening myself up to the day, being welcoming to whatever it is that I'm going to experience that day, having strength to do that, and face the day. And I always like to close my evenings with gratitude, and I'm able to do that through journaling about all the wonderful things that have happened during the course of the day that I can basically sum up and be grateful for. And listen, there's days when things are horrible.
Mm-hmm.
and it's
or at least they feel that way, right?
Yes. And it's very hard to find something to be gracious or have gratitude for. But then that also gets you to get into the mindset of really identifying specifically, what does gratitude mean for you? Like, there's been days where I was like, oh, the person at the coffee counter gave me some extra whipped cream on
that's it,
in my macchiato, right?
Yeah, or this wrist right here isn't broken, so I can write this list, right?
Exactly.
Sometimes
Or
you just gotta go for the very basics. Yeah.
Are on for the next 15 days.
Yes, exactly. Paid for, powered up. Yeah.
Exactly. It's not always going to be, I got this or I received this or whatever, but really closing the day with being grateful. So when it comes to, and mindful, when it comes to the role of the care giver, sometimes we have to, look at it from the standpoint of, I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to be able to help my mom or my dad or my children or
Right.
my neighbor,
Yeah. And the resources to pull it together and
Yeah.
asking for help from those resources. I mean, that's so important. I want to go back to something that you said because I don't want it to get lost. You talked about moving away from some of the stimulus, right? Taking a hike, going for a walk, taking a nap, right? That's so important. I don't think that people understand the importance of rest and respite, right? Because they're constantly on, especially if you're a caregiver, you're constantly on. You're just all the time giving, and there's no opportunity to restore and replenish, right? And so really giving yourself that time and that space to restore and replenish so that people are actually getting the fullness of you and not, the scraps and the leftovers and the pieces because you're so burnt out that you don't have anything else to give, right?
Yeah,
I think
and
that's that.
I think that that's important to point out because at the end of the day, caretaking is spiritual work.
Mm-hmm.
Point blank, period. Like, it's spiritual work. And we all know that when things affect us in this world, they always affect us and hit us first on a spiritual level, right? And then on a physical level, and then a mental level. So we have to make sure that we're taking care of our full energetic bodies when it comes to this work and being helpful and being mindful of the fact that being that this is a spiritual process, that we've got to make sure that there's, number one, balance, right? That we're balancing the work and the energy that we're putting out.
Yeah.
But then we're also replenishing the vessel from which that energy is leaving.
Yeah. And that we're being respectful of ourselves because self-care is spiritual work too.
Yes.
It's not just about taking care of other people, right? And that it's okay to ask for help in doing that. That's another thing that I'm constantly saying when we talk about techniques and tools and tips for how to do this self-care work. Really checking in with yourself, seeing what you need, and then asking people to help with what you need. That's really an important and key piece of this, right? That you don't have to do everything by yourself. You shouldn't be doing everything by yourself. Respect people enough to believe that they can be helpful too, right? That you're not the only person in the world that has something to offer. That other people can also be helpful. Respect them enough and pull them in.
Exactly. And I said that they're capable.
Yeah, that they're capable. Exactly.
Yeah, I think
that they're capable.
I see that a lot when it comes to women. And, it has to be done a particular way.
Right.
This is what equates to it being right.
That's right.
This is how it needs to be done. And
I'm the only one that can do it.
Exactly. Yep. You have to sit back and you have to ask yourself, is that really true? Is that really true? I had a roommate at one particular time who told me that I loaded the dishwasher incorrectly. And I'm not a dishwasher girl, never have been.
Right.
Old school, we didn't grow up with a dishwasher in New York, so I'm used to washing dishes. So me stepping out and loading the dishwasher and taking on that responsibility was something different because I didn't do dishwashers.
You never did that. Yeah, I'm the same way. I am totally the same way. Yeah.
Yeah, but it caused me to Google, how do you load a dishwasher?
Yeah.
And to my surprise, all of the posts were like, there's no incorrect way to load a dishwasher. Like, just don't break it.
Yeah.
So, I always... Exactly. And I was confident enough to be able to be like, okay, I don't want to break the dishwasher because then I'm going to have to pay for it. It's going to be my responsibility. And then I would feel horrible about breaking the dishwasher. And so I often bring up that example when people tell me or start to mention the fact that it has to be done a certain way. And this equates to right. And I just challenge folks in terms of like, is that really the case?
Yeah. Is that really true? Yeah.
Is that true?
No, I'm with you. I think that's such an important point because a few things happen, right? First of all, you're exhausted from trying to make everybody do things your way, right? Secondly, people get tired of trying. And if nobody's ever going to do things the way that you do them. So if doing it the way that you do it is a requirement for doing it, then people just throw their hands up in defeat.
Yes.
And then you use that, or we use that, as a justification for us having to do it. Oh, you see, nobody else wants to do it, or nobody else does it, or nobody else does it right. Well, nobody else does it because they don't want to deal with you and your criticism about how it ain't the same way you would do it, right? Exactly. And people just will back off. Nobody wants to work that hard to help you with anything. And so then you find yourself burnt out, blaming other people for not doing things, and they're running around like, you know what, it's not worth trying because no matter what I do, she ain't gonna be happy. Right? So that's an important piece of that, is be careful with your energy and have you set it up in such a way where you're always having to do things because you don't trust other people to do them. Right? And then you blame them for that.
Yeah.
You know, that's so important. And then the other thing that came to mind as you were talking is, you know, really being able to share that workload, right? And just back up. Right? Because I was having this conversation recently with a friend of mine who was talking about how her and another friend are in these marriages and they love their husbands and they're exhausted because the whole day and taking care of the kids and work, and then they get into bed and their husbands, you know, want to cuddle, want to play, want to talk, and they are just like ready to pass out. And you know, yeah, and the husbands are like, no, let's go out, right? And the wives are like, no, I need to pass out, right? And I said to my friend, if you are in a situation of any kind where by the end of the day you want to pass out and your partner has the energy to go out, you guys really need to rethink the workload. Yeah. It is not well allocated.
It's not.
You know what I mean?
It's not.
You guys are supposed to be partners, and one of you is exhausted and the other one is, you know, full of energy and wanting to do something. That means that you guys are not splitting that workload correctly, right? And so instead of taking all this pride in being the person who does it all, right, and then resenting other people for not helping you, and then other people resenting you for not allowing them in, why don't we just take a breath, take a moment? And we've all done that, right? Why don't we just take a breath, take a moment, and rethink, how do we ask for what we need? And not become so identified with being a caregiver that we lock ourselves out of the opportunity to relax, you know?
Yes. Yep. Totally agree.
That's
totally
an important piece of it. Yeah. Totally so, agree. You know, checking in with ourselves, journaling, praying, meditating, involving our support systems, asking for help, all really important ways to battle, right? To recognize and to combat caregiver burnout. Because it's one thing for us to be helping other people. It's another thing for us to be helping other people at the cost of our own mental health, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And then also, you know, it's one thing to be helping people and it's another thing to be helping people well, right?
Yes.
Because just because you're showing up doesn't mean that it's efficient. Just because you're showing up, it needs to be practical as well. So, you know, being able to address that. I mean, you just talked about the imbalance in terms of workload with husband and wife. You know, sometimes that has to be something that's addressed when it comes to, you know, family members and siblings, right? And being able to kind of spread the responsibilities across everybody in the tribe as opposed to it just being you. So,
and having those difficult conversations, because 9 times out of 10, people don't really even realize that you're tired, because the one thing that caregivers do so well is make believe they're not exhausted, right? Right? So really having some of those really honest conversations, like when I'm tired, I'm like, wow, I'm tired. Or when people are like, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm not doing well this week. Like, this is a tough week for me. I'm really struggling. Oh, how can I help? I'm so happy you asked. Let me text you my list of things.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Let me send you this Excel document.
You know,
this spreadsheet that I got.
Yes. really being honest with people about where you are and what you need. It doesn't make you any less competent, any less capable. On the contrary, it will often make you more competent, more capable, more efficient, more effective, more full, because you're allowing other people to give to you in the same way that you're giving to other people. And so there's a reciprocation of energy, and there's a flow of energy. And it's not this stagnant energy where it's going in one direction and then you're being depleted and other people are totally oblivious to your exhaustion. So I think that honest and difficult communication is really just such an important piece as well,
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you had to close out with just one statement to prevent caregiver burnout, what do you think it would be?
Oh, one statement.
Yeah, feel like I should put you into a little pressure there, Miss Robinson.
That's a lot of pressure.
Give me one sentence that listeners can take away.
It's great to give, but we have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable in the process as well. I think a lot of times caregivers put up, not necessarily walls, but they put on a face, right, of always having it together or needing to have it together. And like I said, this is spiritual work. It challenges you in various different areas. So don't allow your perception of what you need to be to overshadow what it is that you personally need for yourself in order to continue to move forward and do what you need to do for yourself and for others. So I know that was more than a sentence, but
no, that's great. That's great. And I would close out by saying, in Latino culture, in Spanish, there's this saying that says, caridad contra caridad no es caridad, which basically means charity that goes against charity isn't charity, right? That if you're doing more for someone else than you're doing for yourself, then it's all being undone, right? So I would just say to really look at what you're doing, how you're doing it, why you're doing it, and who you're doing it for. And is there a way where there's a win-win as opposed to other people winning and at your expense, right? Love it. Yeah. All right. Well, that has been us for SOS, Sisters Overcoming Stress. We're your co-hosts, Tia Robinson and Dr. Denora Nieves, and we will see you next time. Please join us. We are always talking about stressors, stress management, and stress management techniques to keep you living your best life. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.